Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lindsay Medlin. I am the marketing manager here at Straightaway, and I will be facilitating today's events. I have Sherry Johnson and Debbie Damus with me. They're going to be taking you through a webinar called Taking Care of Your Own Career. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We have saved some time at the end of the webinar today to take some questions, so feel free to put those in the question box at the bottom of the toolbar at any point during this presentation, and I'll collect those and we'll go through them at the end. Also, after this webinar, I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone who is attending, and it'll include all of these resources that we're going to talk about today, including a PDF of the slides and a self-assessment tool. So if you have any questions, like I said, just save them until the end. You can type them in the little, it literally just says question box in the bottom of the toolbar, and we will catch you at the end. So with that, I will let Sherry and Debbie take it away.
Okay, welcome everyone. I think Debbie is going to get us started. Well, actually, there's my slide. I'm Sherry Johnson. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Straightaway. I have multiple years of experience in nursing and in education, and just a passion for training and educating CNAs and nurses. So I am happy to be with you today.
And I am Debbie Damus, also happy to be here today. I've got over 30 years experience, mostly in the long-term care space, but I do have a little bit of acute in my background. And I've had multiple roles in the long-term care arena, such as the MDS nurse, charge nurse, restorative nurse, regional nurse, corporate nurse. I recently was working for Relias as the group product manager for the post-acute care product, and very much believe in education as a powerful tool that we can use to keep everybody on what we need to do, keep us out of problems with the compliance. And I'm really happy to be working with Straightaway, helping us build an instructor network. So let me tell you just a little bit about Straightaway. So who is Straightaway? Many of you may have not have heard of us at this point, but Straightaway is a company that's owned by Bertelsmann, and Bertelsmann is a German-based family-owned business, and they have been around for over 100 years. They have different brands in their portfolio, such as Penguin Random House, who is a huge book publisher, and B&G, Bertelsmann Music Group. And if some of you can remember back in the day when you would get the leaflet in the mail to put your stickers on the postcard, and you would get those CDs for free if you promised to buy, however many over the next year. Well, that is Bertelsmann that started that company. So Bertelsmann, about 5 years ago, started the Bertelsmann Education Group, and that purchase was made with a company that Relias started. I'm sure you know of Relias as the leading provider of continuing education for healthcare professionals and compliance training for healthcare organizations. Straightaway is currently a sister company to Relias, and our focus is on initial CNA certification programs and the provision of instructors to teach the programs if an organization does not have a staff member that meets the requirements, or they just don't want the day-to-day responsibilities of running a training program, but they love the idea of being able to build their own CNA pipeline. So today, we've got an agenda we want to talk about, but as educators, you are helping others find their career and prepare them to be successful in their first healthcare role. But today we're going to talk about taking care of your own career, because a lot of times we put other people first, we forget about taking care of ourselves. But we're going to take a few minutes today to talk about how you take care of your career. So are you currently taking care of your career? Are you making strategic decisions regarding your own career path, or are you just leaving it to chance? Whether you're actively planning your career or just starting to think about it, hopefully you will get some ideas today on where to start and how to perfect your process. So today we're going to give you some things to think about when planning your future career goals. These include standards of practice, self-assessment, setting goals, setting a plan in motion, measuring progress, and owning it like a boss. So Sherry, can you get us started by talking a little bit about standards of practice?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Debbie. The Association of Nursing Professional Development has established our standards of practice and this practice model that you see on the screen. As nurse educators, our goal or end game is still to provide optimal care and health to the public. But in that role, in our roles, we use various activities to accomplish the goal. You can see in the middle of the graph, and these include onboarding or orientation, competency management, education, role development, collaborative partnerships, and research or using evidence-based practice and quality improvement activities. Through these activities, learning, change, and professional role growth competency happens. So let's take a look at some of these roles that we perform. All right, so sorry about that. Okay, so on this next slide, we see the 7 roles that we employ as staff development directors or nursing professional development practitioners. And they include the learning facilitator. We certainly serve as a change agent. We mentor others. We're a leader. We champion for scientific inquiry, and that is using evidence-based practice. We look at how we're doing things, and we advocate for making sure we're doing things the best way. And we partner for practice transitions. How many of us work with other nurses or providers that come into our organization and they came from a different background? If we're in long-term care, maybe they came from acute care. If we're in the hospital, maybe they were in pediatrics and now are going to critical care. So we certainly as educators partner with them in their practice transition. So these are what we do in our role. The how we do it is a pretty consistent process. These standards and competencies look a whole lot like the nursing process. First we conduct a needs analysis, or that's called an assessment of practice gaps. At an organizational level, this could look like new technology implementation or a new or different patient population, or maybe an area identified through our infection control surveillance activities. At an individual level, it's often identified through orientation or in the clinical setting. The second step is where we identify the learning needs. We formally name the topics or areas of practice that need an educational intervention. Next, we identify the outcomes we expect from the educational activity. And then planning. Planning is a step that I think we often rush through, and it's not always well thought out. So often we immediately rush to an intervention without proper planning. We haven't thought about what's really the root cause. Will this training meet the needs that we've identified? Do we just do something because we're told to, or that we're under such a tight time crunch we just put something out there? This is something as nurse educators that we need to really do well. Once all the steps are done, we implement our plan and conduct the evaluation in an ongoing manner just to see how we're doing. Next up, as we kind of look at the process, really understanding what those standards of practice are and how to implement those, we need to see how we're doing in that role. How are we performing? This is the foundation knowledge that is required to build from and to see our roadmap for our own professional development. As instructors, as well as a facilitator, it will be helpful for you to do a self-assessment on the critical areas of your current role and where you may have knowledge gaps. So as we looked at those standards and the kind of the ways we do things for others, we have to turn that on ourselves and see how we're performing. So the ANPD that the professional organization we've been referencing, tells us what those roles in the scope of practice are. In the past, we've called this role the staff development director, and some of you still may have that title. But this one role that you do day in and day out is the learning facilitator. So let's look at the components of this role to base our self-assessment upon. This tool that you'll get after the webinar is really going to help you identify your strengths and opportunities for growth. We'll talk about it today, but some of the areas that this tool looks at specifically are designing a learning needs assessment and data collection methods. How are you at designing those needs assessments when you look at your organization or even the individuals? How well do you apply the educational design process? Do you use the domains of learning and Bloom's taxonomy when you're planning an educational event? Do you use varied education methods and delivery models? Do you facilitate group activities and discussions well, or is this something that you might need a little more strength and training on? Do you adjust your content and teaching materials for strategies for the learning situation and the audience? How well do you adapt those things? So these are all areas that we need to look at in our own performance. The infamous question that we often ask ourselves is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? We all have goals in our career, and you don't have to stay in the same place, but we have to take a positive stance in helping establish those goals. Whether you've already found your niche as an instructor or you're looking at this role in teaching as a stepping stone to another part of your career growth, you need to know where you are and where you want to go. We also know that the best laid plans are also subject to change. Sometimes life happens. So having a general idea of where you want to go at the very least is something that all of us should have. So goal setting is multifaceted. It's an introspection and kind of takes time for how we are doing ourselves and how we can do better. A SWOT analysis is something that's done in business all the time. It's a process that can be very helpful for us in finding our own strengths and weaknesses, our opportunities, and the threats to our own goals. We'll talk about this a little later, but for now, Debbie, can you walk us through this SWOT analysis?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sherry. So Sherry mentioned SWOT analysis, and it's typically done in business. What they look for when they're doing a SWOT analysis is where they stand as far as where their opportunities lie for further growth, what the potential pitfalls that are out there, and how they can maybe mitigate this, or maybe they're barking up the wrong tree and they don't want to go there. So SWOT, as Sherry might have mentioned, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The first two look internally at your specific areas of strength or weakness. So it's what do you have that you bring to the table. Opportunities and threats are those that are outside of you, either in your current organization or in your personal life. Let's look at a couple examples of the things that go into each of these columns. So in the far left-hand column, you have your internal strengths, and that can be your personality traits, your education, the network that you have, your skills, your competencies. For someone who's been around in the business for a while, those can be quite lengthy, and that could be a very good positive thing to have. Some weaknesses could be that maybe you don't have a strong network, or you're not comfortable or proficient with technology. Maybe you've got some poor work habits. From an external perspective, maybe there's opportunities where there is a need for CNA, the CNAs that you are training. So there's an excellent opportunity for you in your career. And you get to maybe use new technology where maybe that was one of your weaknesses. As far as external threats, things that you really don't have any control over, like the changing in the industry. We're coming up on PDPM being implemented in just a few days, and that's been cause of a lot of angst for people in this industry. So once we get past it, I know we'll be fine. We always are as an industry. But right now, that could be an external threat to some of the things that you want to look at professionally. So maybe your company is making a company decision maker that doesn't like you or doesn't support you. I think we've all had those in our past, and we were all able to find a path around that. So doing this SWOT analysis will help find your strengths and weaknesses. And like Sherry said before about your self-assessment, you need to be honest with this, because if you're not being honest with yourself, then you're not going to lead yourself down the path that you feel you really need to be on. And also keep in mind that what we're looking at here is just designed as to give you an idea of things to look at. Your list could look quite different from this, so everybody's is very personal to them. What's important to note is that being completely honest, like I said, when doing this, will help you find the right opportunities and improve yourself as far as your career positioning. So after you've done that, we're going to lay out the plan. And again, if you're kind of reading the subtext here, this is really very much like the nursing process. You've completed your self-assessment that Sherry talked about. We've done a SWOT analysis, and you have a good idea of where your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats lie. You have found that you have a lot of areas where you feel very strong and competent, and somewhere you could use some more work. The next step is to lay out your plan. What do you feel would be the best steps to take at this point? Do you feel that joining a professional organization or group that you could learn with and from would be a good move? Maybe reading some articles or books to increase your knowledge would work best for you. That's the purpose of this step. How am I going to go forward with all of this information that I've collected about myself? But one thing to be cautious about is taking on too much at one time. For instance, if you have determined that you would benefit from more education, that's wonderful. Just be sure not to take on another high time investment along with that. Try to keep your plan reasonable and attainable and in balance with your other commitments you have in your life. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for burnout. So when we're talking about setting goals for yourself, which is part of laying out the plan, don't just create goals like I'm going to join a professional organization. We want to talk about using SMART goals. And many of you probably have heard about SMART goals before, but for those of you who haven't, they're goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. When we're talking about a specific goals, what is it exactly that you want to do? A measurable goal was how will you know when you've achieved this goal? So we have to have a means of knowing when we've gotten there. Is it something that's achievable? Is it in your power to accomplish this, whether from internal or external focus? Is it something that you can realistically do? And again, realistic, can you realistically achieve it? And it's time bound. When exactly do you want to accomplish this by? So if you're going back to college, you want to achieve this maybe in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It took me 7 years to get through nursing school because I just took it kind of one little bit at a time. So some common mistakes that you can have in setting goals is creating one that is too big. If it's a big goal, like you're going to go back and further your education, you may want to break that down into smaller chunks, like you're going to register for a class at a local or online college for the fall semester. It's kind of like the old sayings, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's very true of my experience getting through nursing school for that 7 years. But at the end of the day, I made it and I achieved my goal. As I stated, don't create too many goals. Start slow and know that once you achieve these goals, there will be more that you will want to take on. I always start with those that are easiest to complete, so I get an early sense of accomplishment. I like to feel like I've gotten something done, not that I've taken on this big, huge behemoth of a goal and I'm not getting anywhere with it. It's kind of deflating to me. So I always pick the easy stuff and work on those first. Write down your goals in your plan. The process of writing out a plan is a way of creating accountability to yourself. Keep it in a place where you can see it easily, and then you're constantly reminded of that goal. So when it comes down to working the plan, this is just kind of a very high level overview of some examples of things that could be written on your plan. Get it into motion. You may need to adjust it here and there from time to time, but if you've taken the time and we're thoughtful putting it together and we're honest with yourself and we're really trying to drive your career, that really, your plan shouldn't take much adjustment moving on down the road. So for example, you've decided that you want to read more about becoming a facilitator by October 1. What does that look like? What were the SMART goals that you set up to achieve this goal? What type of publications were you going to read? Were you going to get a book? Were you going to attend a seminar? You're going to do something. What were your SMART goals to get you there? Same for the others that are listed here. Again, your list will probably look vastly different than what this one does.
Lather, rinse, and repeat. Certainly we've all heard that before. Pulling it all together, we remember our standards of practice and we go through the process. We do our self-assessment, our SWOT analysis, we create the plan and work the plan, and then that continuous evaluation of the plan. It is an ongoing process that you can use over and over. That's what I love about this. There's no start and stop. It's just jump in, keep going, and keep moving forward. And lastly, really own it like a boss. It's your development plan. It's something that you should look at on a continual basis. I have a former colleague who sits down every year and reviews her life plan as well as her career plan. She takes a critical look at every aspect of her life. And I think that's something that we could all get in the habit of doing, is just going back, seeing where we are and where we want to go, and then what do we need to do about it. Make decisions like you are the boss. You are, after all, the CEO of your own career. These are some resources that Debbie and I both use often and have really liked. The Association for Nursing Professional Development, the Alliance for Continuing Education in Health Professions. Both of these have a lot of tools and resources that you can use both for your own development, but also for use in your teaching. Toastmasters is another great organization. If you need help with public speaking, telling stories, getting out in front of people, this is a great organization. And then, of course, our gold standard, the American Nursing Association. All great resources that you can get on and explore. So finally, if you have any questions, I think now would be the time that we'll take those. Lindsay, back to you.
All right, y'all. So we had a couple of questions come through. Please feel free to add to this, but I'll go ahead and start with what we have. Again, that question box is in the bottom of your toolbar on the right side of your screen. Okay, so the first question looks like, what are the average number of goals you would recommend someone have?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think it varies from person to person. You don't want to have so many goals that they're not achievable and you feel overwhelmed by all the goals that you're setting. So again, start slowly, start with the easy stuff and build them up. I don't think that there's a right answer or a wrong answer for that. It's kind of whatever works for you, but don't overwhelm yourself with too many goals that are going to kind of bog you down and make you feel like you're not being successful in moving your plan forward.
Cool. So good rule of thumb to start small.
Yes.
Dream big, start small.
Yes, exactly. Dream big, start small. Love it.
All right. So the next question is, I have been a nurse educator for over 15 years. I have done some career planning and feel that I am in a good place with my career. Any suggestions for people like me?
Congratulations, 15 years, that's a long time to be out in the field and providing education to others. And I'm glad it sounds like you found your niche and that you're really happy with it and you don't have any aspirations beyond that, which is great because we need strong educators out there. But what I might suggest you do, and it's not so much more from a developing your career perspective, but helping others develop theirs. You probably have so many stories to tell and information to share about how you've done things that maybe you want to become a mentor to a new instructor, and impart some of the things that you've learned.
Cool. That's great. All right. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, but I'll leave it open for another couple seconds if anybody has anything last minute. As I said before at the beginning of the webinar, I will be sending a follow-up email with all of oh, sorry, we just got another one come through. Okay. Let me finish that train of thought. So I will be sending a PDF of all the slides as well as the self-assessment tool, and we'll have all the links that Sherry shared, and a recording of this webinar too. I don't know if I said that earlier. Okay, so the next question that came through, what is coming in healthcare in the near future that you mentioned that once we get past it, we'll be okay? Thank you.
Yeah, Debbie, that was about PDPM. You want to answer that?
Yeah. PDPM is the change in the payment model that post-acute care is being paid for Medicare Part A patients. So it's the patient-driven payment model, and it's changes to the MDS, and it's changes in how the reimbursement is going to be given to facilities. So a lot of your administrators, directors of nursing, regionals, and corporate folks are very much entrenched on how they're going to maintain the reimbursement. So that's been a really big focus. So a lot of things have taken a lesser priority. So once we get comfortable with these changes, because they are coming October 1, because that's the first day of the new fiscal year for the federal government, that's when it all goes into effect. So everybody's really nervous right now, wondering what the impact to their organizations is going to be from a financial perspective.
Okay.
And
Any other questions?
Just to add on to that a little bit, I don't know of anything else that's coming up behind that. We've made it through the mega rule, so it's part 3 of that is being implemented. I think they're pushing a little bit of that off into next year, so that might be something that some organizations are preparing for. But because everybody had already done a lot of work, most organizations, I would have to say, will probably be in full compliance with the mega rule as it's written. But they are looking to push some of that back.
Okay, thanks, Debbie.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So I will, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. This has been great. All right, so like I said, I'll send out all this stuff afterwards, so just be on the lookout for that. And we'll be having another webinar next month, so stay tuned. Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.